Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. Julian here for another episode, and this is one we're going to be talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, we've made a few episodes so far talking about different teams and their players and their fantasy relevance of those players. This episode is going to be exactly the same. We're going to talk about the lines for the Leafs and then individual players, whether I think they should be drafted at their current ADP or not. Before we jump into it, guys, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you do want to take your support to the next level, check me out on Patreon. The link's in the description below, and you get so many perks like being able to access my draft rankings, being able to access early access videos, as well as accessing a Patreon exclusive fantasy league. And the spots are really close to full now, guys. So if you do want to join that, and I suggest you do, definitely follow me on Patreon. Jumping into the Leafs projected lines now, on the top line, we got Matthew Knies, Auston Matthews, and Mitch Marner. On the second line, Bobby McMann, John Tavares, and William Nylander. On the third line, we got Pontus Holmberg, Max Domi, and Calle Jarnkrok. All right, let's jump into the Leafs players now. And first guy going the earliest is Auston Matthews. Last year had 69 goals and 107 points, going at ADP of 4.4. So most people are drafting him 4th or 5th overall. If you can get him there, that's a steal, honestly, guys. I have him ranked 3rd overall, and he does belong 3rd right after McKinnon and McDavid, of course, at number 1. The next guy is William Nylander, who scored just under 100 points last year, finishing with 98 points, but 40 goals. The dude shot the puck a lot last year, over 300 times, which was a big difference maker. That really does increase a player's fantasy value when they start shooting the puck really a lot. So Nylander does that again. He's pretty much a lock for a top 20 spot once again in fantasy. And I don't mind the ADP at all. I do have him ranked at 17, so slightly after, but Nylander is definitely a safe bet, and a right winger is quite valuable in fantasy hockey. Then with an ADP of 31.3 is Mitch Marner, who scored 85 points, 26 goals last year. And I personally have him ranked as the 22nd best fantasy player. So having him at an ADP of 31.3, that's a pretty good value you're getting there. Plus, once again, he's a right winger, which is very valuable in fantasy hockey, especially to get a good right winger. The next guy on this list is Joseph Woll, who is primed to be the starter this year in Toronto. Last year only started 23 games and had 12 wins. Unfortunately, was injured for a bit, but he is a pretty good goalie. His ADP is just about 77 though, and to me that's just too early. I have him ranked closer to 170 just because I think Woll is a great goalie and he's going to have a good year, but I think he's going to split starts quite a bit with Anthony Stolarz. I still think he starts more games, maybe 45 or 50, but it's not enough to rank him that high. He's not going to be a complete starter like a 55 to 65 game starter. There's no way. Stolarz is really underrated, and that's why I have Woll a little bit later. I don't think drafting him this early is a particularly good idea. Next guy on this list is Morgan Rielly with an ADP of 82, 58 points in 72 games, which is pretty solid, and his peripherals are decent. Now, Morgan Rielly is pretty much a lock for power play 1, so he's definitely got a lot of value. I personally have him at an ADP of 92, but reaching for a defenseman is never too bad of an idea, especially since defensemen do tend to go early in a lot of drafts. So 10 spots reaching for him, not the end of the world. You're pretty much guaranteed a really solid defender in Morgan Rielly if you draft him. The next guy on this list is John Tavares, and last year in 80 games, he had 65 points. And he is still a very good hockey player, and people are forgetting that with his ADP because his ADP is 99.9, so going around 100, that's super crazy. This could be the absolute steal of the draft. I know he's a natural centers, and those tend to go later, but if you're getting John Tavares around 100, you are absolutely getting great value. I have him ranked at 33 for reference. My rankings don't factor in position, so obviously be smart when you're making your picks. But if you can get a natural center as good as John Tavares this late in the draft, that is a great pick. The next guy on this list is Anthony Stolarz with an ADP of 132.7. So he's actually going decently early. I mean, not super early or anything like that, but the fact that Woll is going so early and him also going on ADP of 132 should tell you something, that they're going to be splitting quite a bit. And although I love Stolarz and I see him with a bare minimum of 35 starts this year, I can't recommend you drafting him around 132. That's just way too early for a guy who's going to see maybe half the starts on a team. Then Jake McCabe. Last year had a decent season with 28 points in 73 games, but you're not drafting Jake McCabe for his point totals. He has pretty solid peripherals like his hits and his block totals. Now, his ADP is 169.3. And I don't think he's going to score 8 goals again this year. His shooting percentage was very high last year. I'm seeing him score 4 to 5 goals. And I have him ranked 223, but inside my top 50 defensemen. So I don't hate him as a pick late in drafts. He provides a pretty safe floor, but don't expect a very high ceiling with Jake McCabe. Next guy is OEL going 172.5, and I think OEL is an absolute throwaway waste of a pick. At best, he mans the power play 2, which gets very little time in Toronto. I personally have him ranked 359th best fantasy player, which means he has pretty much no fantasy relevance. The next guy on this list is Simon Benoit, who's going on an ADP of 181.5. Had only 5 points in 64 games, so you're obviously not drafting him for the point output, but last year had 246 hits, and that's why you would draft him, because he was 4th in the league in terms of hits per game, and had a decent block shots output too. So really, if you're in a super deep categories league where you need hits and some blocks, he might have some value. Other than that, maybe if you're in a weird bangers league where hits really count for a lot, then grab him. But for the most part, Simon Benoit doesn't have a whole lot of fantasy value. Then Max Domi doesn't really have any value unless he gets top 6 minutes in Toronto, which is a possibility. But as of right now, I have him projected to the 3rd line, so as of right now, I can't recommend drafting Max Domi. His peripherals aren't really that good, so even if he scores 50 points, he doesn't have a lot of fantasy value. Matthew Knies could maybe have a breakout season this year with top-line minutes like I have him projected right now with Matthews and Marner. I'm not overly crazy about him, but if you're in an incredibly deep league with hits, and we see that he's playing with Matthews in the preseason, then maybe he might be rosterable. And finally, Bobby McMann, who currently does not have an ADP in fantasy, and I actually have him ranked as the 232nd best fantasy player. So he does have some fantasy value as long as he does stay in Toronto's top 6 like he was last year playing with Tavares and Nylander. That's a pretty good spot for him. He's going to put up a point every couple games or so. His floor is really helped by the amount of hits that he gets, so that's pretty decent, but honestly, I'm not recommending drafting him. I'm not expecting a breakout or anything like that from him. He really is just an okay filler for the bottom of your roster. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed my content today, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit that join button on YouTube or on Patreon if you do want to take your support to the next level. And I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.